Patricia Kroondijk, and welcome to the session on blockchain, a revolution in banking or a buzzword. Until very recently, I was leading strategy at the Financial Innovation Lab that Hitachi has established in Silicon Valley about 4 years ago. And most of the work that we are doing there and we're doing there over the past 4 years was centered around blockchain technology. And so today I would like to give you our perspective on blockchain technology and what we found so far, and talk through a few interesting use cases that we specifically worked on as well. And so first of all, I really wanted to go into a little bit more of what we've been doing at the lab. So we were very focused on testing the technology and also working at the same time on finding very valuable business models and also the right use cases. And so these are some of the components that we really included in our research and also in the actual proof of concepts that we conducted with various companies in the financial services industry, but also outside in energy and oil and gas, actually. We are not at all interested in cryptocurrency, so when you speak about blockchain, there's often Bitcoin coming up, but that is something that we have left to the side. We are focused on the enterprise use cases where blockchain can be applied. And so just a little bit of background on what Hitachi has been doing with regards to blockchain. They have been working on the technology since the early 2000s, so we have a very long and deep knowledge in this space. And this picture here is actually one of the earlier patents that we filed in the early 2000s. Now, at the time, we were working on something that is called the hysteresis signature. And this is a digital signature that is designed to ensure authenticity and also permit identification of digital documents. And this sort of focus still very holds true to what we are working on today. And so just quickly to talk through some of the challenges and benefits that we've seen so far with the blockchain technology and the use cases that we've been working on is that 20 years later, after we started doing all this research on blockchain, we're actually still figuring out the right use cases. And so some of the challenges is that even though it's been around for a fairly, significant amount of time now, and we've been working on that actively, it's still fairly immature technology. Also, there's still an uncertain regulatory and compliance environment, and there's limited availability of technical skills worldwide. This pretty much holds as a challenge. If you tell your IT department to install an Oracle database, that's fairly simple to do, and people know how to run it and maintain it. But if you tell them to set up 5 blockchain nodes and administer and maintain that, it becomes far more challenging. And now, we do feel that blockchain technology is rightly considered to be revolutionary. So we don't think it's a buzzword. So let me also answer that piece of where we think the technology sits. It makes the value chain much more reliable, and it creates this digital trust between different parties that wasn't able to do that before. And it's very efficient compared to the conventional approach, and specifically in the financial world, it can add a lot of benefit that I'll show you later. It's also a place where transactions can occur without an intermediary in real time and with unaltered records. And so this is summarized in the other 2 bullets under the benefits when we talk about the lower operating cost and also simplified operations, and specifically also this ecosystem connector, an enabler for the value chain as a whole. So it does take time for some revolutions to reach critical impact, and slowly we might see a movement from the bits and the bytes to the blocks and the change, and we do believe in that. And so to understand the right use cases and areas for true revolution, I think we need to just take a short look at more details of the benefits. And so what the blockchain is really about is that it's codifying a business process. It's very much around business process re-engineering and business process standardization. And so traditional tools, they can do this within a single company. So creating some value systems and using business process as a code with workflow management and things like that. But outside a single company, a blockchain can add significant value. But we have also a use case, and I'll show that later, where we use the blockchain within a single company, and it still added a lot of benefit. And so it can create this workflow both within or outside of across organizations. And participants can share single ledgers, and events and data can be sort of coded. Some of the other benefits of the blockchain is, of course, the mathematical hashing. So it can store data and not have altered data, and also the proof that it can be securely stored with third parties. So it's not just encrypted data, it's much more complex than that. And that creates that high degree of trust that I talked about. Also, you don't need to replicate data across systems, so data sharing becomes much more easy across different nodes and different parties with a guaranteed level of trust in it. So moving along, and these are just some technical notes of which I don't want to go through all of them, but some of the more important ones are the fact that not everything needs to be stored on the blockchain. A large amount can actually be stored off-chain, and this really helps improve speed, and also with the fact that some data must be visible, but other data you don't want to be visible actually to some of the parties, or only between certain nodes. And Hyperledger has been actively working on that to create some of that flexibility that is actually necessary for using it in production and in real use cases. And so when we look at blockchain use cases, these are some of sort of the map that we feel and what we have been focusing on. Not all of them, as I said. So I mentioned before, blockchain is much more than just a technology. It's very much around the transformation of business models and processes. And it also is much more difficult to adapt in a marketplace, which you see on the vertical axis. And also the technology complexity increases with certain use cases. And so, for example, when speed is required in securities training, is much more complex than if it's more around consent management in the lower corner here, where it's more around, proving that certain actions have been initiated. And so far, many of the global use cases have really centered around sort of the top right corner, and they were tackling the most complex use cases, supply chain, digital currencies, and it's not really a fair start for the still immature blockchain technology. And so that's why we've also seen quite some failure in some of these use cases. And so with our projects that we've been handling and executing on, we've much more focused on the lower left-hand corner, where we've worked on a consent management, notary services, asset management, much more simpler cases to prove out. And I'll share some examples of that with you today. But first of all, I wanted to briefly also give you an update on the Hyperledger technology that we've been working on. Since 2017, we've been the second highest contributor for Hyperledger Fabric. Actually, for the first time now, the long-term support release came out in July. And so again, some of those biggest updates have really been focused around getting multiple organizations to maintain and agree on some of the chain code parameters, but also having more private data and not exposing everything that needs to be exposed on and off chain. So let me move on so I can quickly show you as well some of the use cases that we've been going through. So one of these use cases was actually for a bank, and this is one of the most simple use cases to start off with, and this is a one that's within a bank, and they had as requests for trades that needed to be made, and these were approved along different departments. And so instead of having that in Excel, because that's where the starting point was for this use case, we actually built a blockchain-based business process management system. And so the flow is controlled by the blockchain through smart contracts, and all data was recorded and couldn't be altered. And so there was a strong audit trail as well for the auditor to check that these trades and trade requests had been processed in the proper way. And so this is a very simple example. It only took us sort of 3 to 6 months to build this. It's in production. And even though it's not with multiple organizations, it added a lot of value because there was many different departments involved, and everyone now has the same ledger to work off from. Another use case that we've been working on is around creating a blockchain platform for green bonds. And so the challenge with green bonds is that there are many different parties involved. They have to be tracking a lot of different information and data in order to stay qualified and prove that they are a green project. And what we have built is a blockchain platform where everyone can upload all the data, and all the stakeholders have access to the same data that cannot be altered, and therefore the bonds can be traced properly and also followed up properly. And so this has been tested, it's been effective, and we're now looking at bringing this into production with several parties. The challenge here was, though, that there's so many different parties, you have to agree on how you actually track and trace these things. And so it hasn't been the technology that has been the most challenging, but it's actually been the standardization of documents that has been the most challenging as well. And so the last one, because I don't have much time and I'm already going over, is a project that has actually been done here in Poland, where we've worked with the National Clearinghouse to work with them on getting a blockchain portal up and running so that they could have both highly secure place for the medical data and also for receipts and work with the bank. And so there is non-personalized documents provided by the blockchain, and it can be proven that they have not been altered. And so these are 3 of the use cases that Hitachi has been working on actively. We have many, many more, but I didn't have time today to go through all of that. But we do feel it's definitely not a buzzword. It just is a matter of time, of finding the right use cases. And so when you are selecting your blockchain projects, we always like to bring up some of these points where don't go after the most complex cases. It really depends on how many companies are involved. Are you replacing an existing process? And that can be challenging. How many nodes should there be? And also processing times, because for trading, the speed is just not there, and payments yet. But maybe if you need to write a signature every minute, that could be something that's much more easily obtainable. And then there's, of course, the return on investment and compliance that needs to be considered as well. Not all blockchains can be audited yet, as is required in the financial industry. And so there's lots of other considerations. But there's definitely, there are definitely the opportunities to look for the blockchain opportunities, and also finding the right partners in this is absolutely critical. And so I'm happy to... if people reach out, I have my email address was on the first page, so I'll just slide back to that and leave my name up. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to connect further with Annie on this topic. Thank you.